Change your heart, change your life, change the planet.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Van Orden, and this is a video that I've been putting off for a long time. It has been over 10 years since I started the Running Raw project, and I've been waiting for an access point to talk about what this past 10 years has been like, how it all started, what I've learned, how I've changed, and where I go from here. And this past weekend, I participated in the U.S. Mountain Running Championships at Loon Mountain in New Hampshire. And I thought this would be a great place to start this conversation because 10 years ago, in 2006, I flew from California, where I was living at the time, to New Hampshire to race in the Loon Mountain race. And that really set the direction for where the Running Raw project would go. So this is a perfect place to talk about these past 10 years, what it's been like, what happened this past weekend at the championships, and where I go from here. So let's rewind to the year 2006 when the Running Raw project was born. Hadn't run for who knows how long, at least a decade, maybe longer, little putts in here and there, but November of 2005 I started running, just to see what was possible on my raw vegan diet because of the energy that I was feeling. I was feeling amazing, felt like I was 18 again. Let's try to run and see if this is something that I can incorporate back into my life. And by the time early 2016 had rolled around, I'd gotten in pretty good shape. I'd only been running for about 2 months, and I felt pretty fit. So I entered a race in early February of 2016. It was a half marathon on Catalina Island, just off the coast of Los Angeles. They call this race the Buffalo Run. And I did quite well. I think I might have been 4th place. I have to look at the results, which you can find on runningraw.com. But I think I might have been 4th in that race, and running a half marathon at that point after only 3 months of training with well over a decade or more, maybe I think maybe even like 17 years of not running. Was pretty extraordinary. So I got pumped, and that's really what took the Running Raw project from an idea into a quest to see what was possible. I had no idea how I was going to do in that race, and my performance far exceeded my expectations. And that's when I began to realize that maybe this diet yields performance that is just off the charts. So let's find out. So I entered a few more races from February up until I think early April, and did quite well. I was racking up some good results, which again you can see on runningraw.com. If you go to the results page, you can see every race I've ever entered, the results are there. Most of my training at that time was in the Santa Monica Mountains, which are pretty steep. The trails there climb quite a bit, so I was getting a lot of vertical in. And that half marathon I did had, I think the first 4 miles climbed like 1,500 feet. So it was not an easy course. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm training in the mountains, I just did really well in a race that had a lot of uphill. Let's start seeing what's out there for climbing races, uphill stuff, because I think I can do well in this. And I discovered that there is a U.S. Mountain Running Championship, which in 2016 was at Mount Washington in New Hampshire, which you have to participate in a lottery to get a slot in that race, unless you apply for an elite bypass. But by the time I found out about the race, the lottery was already done, people had already sent in their elite bypasses, and the race was closed. So I wrote letters to the heads of USA Track and Field, the race director of the race, everybody I could, trying to make an appeal to get me into this race so that I could show everybody what I could do at a U.S. championship. And quite delusionally, I thought that I'd probably medal. I think I can get in the top 3. I'm climbing really well. I've been running for a few months. That's all it takes, right? Especially on a raw vegan diet. So my appeals were not heard. They wouldn't let me into the race. But they did mention that there was a qualifier for the U.S. mountain running team, which would compete in Turkey later that year. And this race was at Loon Mountain in New Hampshire. And I forget how many they took from the qualifier. It might have been 3 or 4. So the top 3 or 4 in the race could make the U.S. mountain running team. And I thought, well, I'm going to do that. So I'll show up in Loon Mountain. I'll make the U.S. team, I'll go to the World Championships, and hey, maybe I'll even medal in the World Championships. So I got to Loon Mountain, July of 2006, with everybody thinking that I was insane and totally delusional. The liaisons for USA Track and Field were there to select who was going to make the U.S. team, and they had read all my letters. I'd sent them my early videos, I'd sent them blog posts, I'd sent them workouts that I had done. I told them that I thought I had a chance to medal, that I'm really fit, and I'm a raw vegan, and they basically thought, okay, this guy's crazy. So I show up at the race, and I introduce myself to all these people, many of whom are now my friends, and have gotten to know me in a very, very different way 10 years later. But at that time, they were not too psyched to have me there or to have long conversations with me. I was a nut job in their eyes. So I did the race, and I went out with the leaders, and for the first 2 miles of that 10K race, I was right there with the leaders, but pretty quickly realized I was in over my head. The climbs just keep getting worse at the Loon race, and the final climb is 1 kilometer long and climbs about 800 feet with grades reaching over 45%. I think the average grade on that final climb might be 35%, and the steepest parts are 45, which means you can touch the ground in front of you. It's that steep. So I got schooled in that race. I don't remember off the top of my head what place I got, 10th or 12th perhaps, but I was way, way, way outside of qualifying for the team. Many minutes behind the guys that qualified. And this was just people in the Northeast, and a lot of them were just local to Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, just your local mountain running crew. Who knew there was such a thing? But these guys really, really schooled me, and they buried me. And that was a really humbling experience. And I could have quit at that point. I could have put my tail between my legs and walked off humiliated because these guys said, okay, he is a nut job, he is delusional. We thought he was, but now he's actually proven it. He's not nearly as good as he thinks. So the Running Raw project could have died right then and there. That could have been it. But it didn't. It kept going because I'm a really insecure person, and I don't like a failure to be the last piece of data that I show to people, that I show to the world. I want my last impression to be a good one. So instead of walking away and saying this doesn't work or I'm not as good as I thought, I said, well, I just have to work harder. I just have to put in the time. I need to talk to these people. I need to befriend these people. I need to learn what they're doing because clearly my training plan isn't working. So I started reaching out to many of the people that were at that race and becoming friends with them, eventually joining the Central Mass Striders, which is the team that many of them are on, and I'm still on that team now 10 years later. And we as a team have won, I think, 15 national championship titles. So it's an incredible team, and we just won the national title again at the U.S. Mountain Championships this past weekend. So I'm really honored to be a part of that team. It's such an extraordinary talent base. So it was a combination of my insecurity and not wanting that to be the last thing that people ever heard of me, because then I am this crazy person. If it ends there, that's all they'll ever hear. But it was also a desire to better represent the diet. I really did believe in this diet, and it really had changed me physically, but I just hadn't done the training, and I didn't know that yet. My increased fitness felt so amazing, but I had no idea what elite running or elite training was like. And I see this a lot in the raw vegan community. People start doing some training, they see their body change, they start feeling really fit, and they think they can conquer the world. But then they get out there and compete with professional or elite athletes, and they realize these guys are orders of magnitude better because they put in 6 to 10 years of training. And that's what it takes. You can't do this overnight. I don't care what you're eating, what magical superfood, 100% fruit diet, whatever you think is the perfect diet. It's still going to take you 6 to 10 years of training to compete at an elite level. That's just the way the body works. That's how adaptation occurs. It's a slow process. So I needed to redeem the diet and show people that just because I'm delusional and had no idea what I was getting into, that doesn't mean that the diet doesn't work. It doesn't mean that the diet is flawed. It just means that I need to work harder and I need to work longer. So let's get back in there and shake it up. So in 2007, I moved back to Vermont to train in the mountains with many of these people and to compete on their team and to be part of that race circuit. And that's something I've done now since 2006. And that Loon Mountain race was really an eye-opener for me, and it allowed me to engage in a way that I would not have had I been successful right off the bat. I would have rested on my laurels, and I may have even ended the project there, like, hey, I did well in a championship, and that's good enough. I can put this thing to bed. But because it didn't work out, it got legs, it lasted, it's endured. And that's not the only thing that has kept this project alive over the past 10 years. In 2008, I was part of a Food Network show. They were doing a documentary about the Running Raw project, which at that time was really taking off. Someone in Al Roker's office had seen my videos, they'd been watching them, and they'd started doing green smoothies, and they were showing people in the office my videos. And apparently Al Roker got wind of what I was doing, had watched some videos, and said, hey, let's maybe do a show about this guy. So they contacted me, and we filmed for probably 6 to 9 months of the year 2008. It was pretty extensive. And they followed me around with a camera, training, eating, racing, all kinds of stuff. And over the course of that time, they filmed me knocking it out of the park. I won a huge stair climb out in Los Angeles, broke the course record, and beat the best guys in the country. In fact, the guy that got second place had never been beaten on American soil. Best guy in the United States. And on camera, I took the victory. So they captured that. And they also captured me in the national championships at Mount Washington, failing miserably for all kinds of reasons. It was just a really stressful event. They were filming the whole thing. I didn't sleep properly. I didn't eat properly. I was traveling too much. Gave a talk the night before in New York City. It was just a huge disaster. And I bonked halfway through the race, and they filmed that as well. And when it came down to editing the show, they chose to use the Mount Washington footage of me failing miserably and not use the footage of the races that I won or did really well in. So they were totally biased in how they cut that film. And not only that, but they edited things out of sequence to make it look like I was prepared for that race. They filmed me eating a gigantic fruit breakfast, and they even put a subtitle that said 45 minutes before the race. I don't eat within 3 hours of a race. I don't know any athlete that eats within 3 hours of a race. That's just a thing you do because you're not going to digest it. And guess what? They filmed that several days after the race, but edited in before the race. And I signed a contract, so nothing I could do. It's just the way it went down. So when the film came out, I announced it to everybody. I'm like, oh my God, I'm on national TV. This is going to be the big thing. We're going to put the raw food diet on the map. They promised me that they were going to showcase the races that I won. They said, don't worry, we're going to make you look like the hero. And I thought, this is it. This is where a raw vegan diet really gets its 15 minutes. But instead, what they did is edited together a story of a guy who is delusional and who fails miserably and who had paramedics giving him glucose at the finish of a race because he bonked. Didn't show any of the successes. And basically the message in that film was, don't try this diet. It's an extreme diet, it's dangerous, and you will fail. And that's really unfortunate. Number one, because it was a lie, they misrepresented it. But number two, because the raw community at that time, who had been really supportive of what I was doing, came down on me like you can't even imagine. I was getting all kinds of hate mail. That's when the 80-10-10, 30 bad community came after me because I had made raw food look really bad. I'd made it look like a crazy fringe diet. Anyway, it was just a horrible experience. So That's when people started fleeing from my YouTube channel. That's when people stopped reading my blog. That's when Running Raw kind of died, 2008. I thought it was going to be the big break, and it turned out to be the thing that broke. But I didn't quit, again, because of my insecurity. I could have walked away. I could have said, okay, screw this. But instead, I'm like, no, that is not the last they're going to hear of me. I'm not going to go down on that note. So I dug deep. And I stopped making videos for a while. I think maybe even a year. I stopped blogging. I just vanished from the world, and I disappeared into the mountains here in Vermont and started training. Started talking to people about new methods of training. And this is where I learned about just lots of easy mileage in the mountains on the trails, eventually getting up to 120 miles a week, but really easy, really gentle, just going at a 12-minute per mile pace for 3 to 4 hours every day. And that built me into this crazy aerobic monster, so that when 2010 rolled around, I was in shape and I won my first U.S. championship for Masters. And then in 2011, I won, I think, 8 more. And then in 2012, I won another, making a total of 10. I won 4 U.S. Masters Runner of the Year awards in 2010, 11, and 12. 2 of them for trail running, U.S. Masters Trail Runner of the Year, and 2 of them for mountain running, U.S. Masters Mountain Runner of the Year. And USA Track and Field puts out those awards, they vote. So that was a huge honor. And also to be recognized by the governing body of running in the country, basically the organization that selects the Olympic athletes. They voted me to be U.S. Masters Runner of the Year, so that was huge to be recognized by them. And that's because of all the work I put in after that failure, and also after the failure at Loon in 2006. So each time I fail, it makes me work harder. It just makes me stronger. The more I endure, the more resilient I get. And there's a few more incidents. That's on the running front. But I think it was 2009. I was giving a lecture on a raw food diet in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And there were quite a few people from Harvard and MIT in the audience. And I was talking about enzymes. And one of them raised their hand and said, "Do you have any idea what you're talking about?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" They're like, "Well, where did you get this information?" And I said, "Well, it was in this book." I forget if it was a David Wolfe book or a Doug Graham book or a Gabriel Cousens, it doesn't matter, but one of the foundational raw books, and I was just parroting what they had said in the book. Most of my early lectures were parroting other people's raw information from the raw Bibles written at that time, combined with my training experience and my racing experience. Like, here's how I'm doing as an athlete on this diet, and here's what these gurus say about the diet. Well, this person's like, "Well, what you're saying is totally wrong. There's no scientific foundation or basis for what you're saying, and the way you're talking about it, you don't even really understand chemistry. Like, have you had a basic chemistry course?" And I was like, "Well, in high school I had one." So turns out this person had a PhD in biochemistry, and they schooled me. They basically gave me a lecture in front of a room full of 100 people that had paid to listen to me talk. And it was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. And they weren't the only person. Other people also chimed in, highly educated people in the fields of microbiology, biochemistry, physiology, and they just tore me to pieces. And again, I could have quit. I could have said, "That's it, I'll never give a lecture again." And for a while, that's how I felt. It was like, I'm never, ever, ever going to speak publicly again about this type of information. And maybe a month later, it's like, okay, I will never do that again without first being prepared, without first knowing exactly what I'm talking about. I hadn't checked any of the references in the books that I had read. I'd just taken it as fact. If David Wolfe said it, it's a fact. If Doug Graham said it, it's a fact. If Gabriel Cousens said it, it's a fact. Why question it? These are the gods of the raw world. So it was 2009 that I started studying. This is when I really immersed myself in iTunes University, which is free, by the way. You can take almost any class you want for free online in the iTunes app on your phone, iTunes U, or on your computer inside of the iTunes application. So I took every course I could on biochemistry, physiology, microbiology, clinical nutrition, everything. And I didn't just take one. I took biochemistry each level, all the way up from introduction to advanced, and then I would take it at Harvard, I'd take it at Yale, I'd take it at Berkeley, I'd take it at Wisconsin. I took every one that was available out there, because each professor is going to give you a different perspective, and some of them contradict each other. And the more exposure you have to this information, the more you start seeing how it all pieces together. And when one professor says this and another professor says something that contradicts, you're like, ooh, well, let me look that up. So this started getting me curious. Instead of just taking it as fact, okay, let me listen to what everybody's saying. Let me listen to the greater conversation. But then let's see where the contradictions are and start piecing together what might be going on by doing additional research or emailing these people and finding out, like, you said this, could you tell me what the mechanism is behind that? Because this person says something different. Why is there a disagreement? So I got really curious and started asking a lot of questions and studying relentlessly. So for years, I spent 6 to 8 hours a day studying these sciences, so that if I ever gave a lecture again, which I did, I started up again, probably in 2010, that I would be prepared and I wouldn't be embarrassed again. And if somebody with a PhD in biochemistry stood up and said, hey, I could actually have a conversation with them and be open to the possibility of them knowing a lot more than me, and then getting excited about the fact that they're giving me new information that's probably really valuable. So instead of being embarrassed, it's like, okay, great, help me expand this conversation. Help me improve how I talk about this information. So that's where my relentless study began. And again, it's because of my insecurity. It's my insecurity that drove me to never again want this terrible thing to happen, and to not to go out on that bad note, to save my face and also to save the diet, to save the information. And that studying has not stopped. I'm the guy who in college and high school never did my homework because I couldn't focus, I couldn't read. I don't know if it was because of my depression. A lot of the research that I've read on depression says that it's very difficult to focus, stay on task, and that is very consistent with my experience. But I couldn't read. So now I listen to audiobooks and podcasts and iTunes U lectures. My focus in study has shifted away from biochemistry and physiology. I still study quite a bit, maybe 20% in those fields, but the vast majority of my research now is listening to books and lectures on neurophysiology, neuroscience, the biochemistry of thought and behavior, and psychology, philosophy, subjects like this, because I realize that all the best dietary information in the world, all the best physiological information in the world, all the best training information in the world is of no value if the person doesn't have the psychological foundation to utilize it. If you're not in the right place, if you're not in the right mindset, that information is of little value to you. In fact, it can actually be detrimental, because great information and I just can't use it, so therefore I must be the problem. I'm a failure, I'm weak, I'm broken, everybody else can do it, I'm the only one that can't. So through coaching, I realized that the most important thing that I can offer people is access. And I do that through metaphor. So I study my butt off and then turn what I learn into metaphor so that other people can hopefully get access to this information and understand themselves, understand their obstacles in a different way, in a way that doesn't make them the victim or the problem. So that is what I do now. I read about 3 books a week, which comes out to 11 or 12 per month. I take extensive notes, about 20 minutes to an hour on each book that I read. I process those notes, I check those notes with other notes. I've accumulated this gigantic database of notes from all the cutting-edge information that's available right now in these fields. And that is so exciting to me. And I finally found a way to share it with you, which I'm going to talk about at the end of this video. But first, how did I do this past weekend at Loon Mountain 10 years later? I have gotten myself into super shape this spring. And 2 weeks ago at the Mount Greylock Half Marathon, I knocked it out of the park. I won by over 7 minutes. And that is a really difficult race. It's the toughest trail half marathon I've ever done. The first 3 miles are constant climb with several thousand feet of gain. I think it's like 2,500 feet of gain in the first 3 miles, mostly coming in miles 2 and 3. Climb to the summit of Mount Greylock, and then you drop for several miles on really technical terrain, and then climb again and drop and climb again. Unfortunately, my Achilles, my heel bone attached to the Achilles, were beat up pretty badly from that race. So I had to take some time off and really knock my training back, which was the smart thing to do. My teeth have been acting up. I've got 3 more teeth that are going to be pulled on July 19th. And I had a major infection in one of those teeth. And these are teeth that have been a problem for years now. It's not like these are just finally showing up. I've been working really hard to keep these teeth as long as I can, but I've gotten to the point where that's not going to work anymore. So anyways, I've been on antibiotics for 3 weeks. And I had 2 tick bites about 6 days before the Loon race. So I showed up with 2 weeks of pretty wimpy training, full of antibiotics, and who knows if the ticks were an issue, but just wasn't there. The fitness that I had at the Greylock Half Marathon just wasn't there. I'm still really fit, but my peak form just didn't happen. I'm not trying to win the race or make the U.S. team. At the age of 48, that's way outside of my possibility. But what I did want was to try to win another Masters title, to be the top 40 and over person in the race. And considering that the people in the race that are 40 and over, many of them are former U.S. team members and former Olympians and former American record holders. These guys are incredible. They're just in their 40s now. Chris Grouch from Boulder, Colorado, he won the championship last year for Masters. He was the U.S. Masters Mountain Runner of the Year for 2015. I think he also might have won the U.S. Masters Trail Half Marathon title. Todd Callahan, also in the race, who is one of my teammates for Central Mass Striders. Todd was the U.S. Mountain Running Champion in 2013, and he was U.S. Masters Mountain Runner of the Year in 2013 as well. So, and then many other amazing guys in the race who are 40 and over, but these are the 2 guys that I was really keying off. Todd and I have been racing each other all spring in the New England Mountain Running Series, and Loon Mountain was the 5th race in that series. In the prior 4, I had beaten Todd, so he hadn't beaten me at all this year. So I was pretty confident that I could get ahead of Todd. Chris Grouch, that's another story. He's a real monster. Super fit guy. So anyways, we got into the race, and it was Todd and Chris and I running neck and neck, and we were moving at a really good clip. We were probably in 22nd place, 2 miles in, hauling along, and then the big climbs started. The climbs early on are pretty big for most people, but they only get worse in this race. So we pushed the pace. We got to 3 miles, neck and neck. I was feeling really good. We got to 4 miles. We were neck and neck. I was feeling good. And as we got to a really steep section, I was feeling good. And then suddenly my legs just gave out. My breathing was controlled. My heart rate was low. I was not in any pain. It's just my legs just lost their juice. And they slowly started to pull away from me. I tried to reel them back in, but didn't have anything in my legs. And then on that final monster climb with 800 feet of gain, I had a power hike. I had nothing. So Chris ended up winning with a fantastic time. He really nailed it. Even if I had my best that day, I don't think I would have beat Chris. Todd, I think, was over a minute ahead of me. And considering that I had beaten him the previous 4 races, that's a sign that something was just not right. So I don't know what it is. I got to go back to the drawing board and try to figure out what's going on with me. But I ended up getting the silver medal in the 45 to 49 age group. Todd is also in my age group, so he won that. He got the gold. But I'm a silver medalist in my age group at a U.S. championship, so that's good. Hey, I'm not going to complain. That's a great performance, but it would have been fun to have my A game there. And that's totally okay, because what I've learned in these past 10 years is how to be resilient, how not to give up, how not to take something that feels humiliating or painful or permanently damaging, and how to transform it into something that's not so bad, like my Achilles tendon. I thought that was the end of my running permanently for the rest of my life in 2013. But after almost 2 years of not running, I decided, screw that. I'm going to find a way to make this work. I'm not going to quit. I don't want to go down yet. So in August of 2015, I hadn't even been running for a year since I started back up again. So in August 2015, I started training, and here I am now in July, and super fit again, and we'll figure out what's going on, and I'll rise again. But the long point of the story is that no matter what happens to you, there's always a way through, and there's always a way to redeem yourself, or there's always a way to reframe things so that you can realize that you don't need to redeem yourself. That what you thought was the most traumatic experience of your life, at the end of the day, a few weeks later, a month later, nobody's going to care, nobody's going to remember, no matter how bad it was. You'll get through it, it'll just blend into the past, and you'll move on, and you'll get excited about new things. So that is the thing that has been the most valuable lesson for me, is that when it looks like something bad is happening, it's not that bad. And I've learned how to be okay with that, and I've learned how to quickly reframe it and quickly bounce back and quickly get myself into a positive state and say, yeah, this is what happened. Let's accept that. Let's work with it. And let's see where the learning is. Let's see how we improve the situation. So there we are. 10 years and a hell of a lot of minutes on this video. But it's been quite a journey. If you're still sticking around, if you're one of the amazing people that has hung on for this entire video, I am now on Patreon. I've avoided Patreon for quite some time. This is a website where you can become a patron. You can subscribe for $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month, $25, and at each level you get different rewards. So at $2 a month, I'm going to give you access to my patron-only feed, which is going to have tons and tons of audio and video and written things that I've done that nobody else has seen yet. These things have not seen the light of day. They're not on YouTube. They're not in my blog or anywhere else. So for $2 a month, you get access to this new information that I'm going to be putting up a few pieces a week. And at the higher levels, you'll get coaching calls, you'll get group calls where we'll do Q&A sessions once a month. You'll get discounts on merchandise, discounts on coaching packages, whatever. And I'm trying to make it really valuable to you. So it's not just about helping me continue to make videos, which I want to do more and more and more, but as I need to work to pay off my teeth, I've had to find ways to make money that keeps me away from making videos. So by setting up the Patreon account, you can help me continue making videos on a more regular basis, and by donating a little bit more, I'm going to throw a bunch of value back at you so that everybody's happy. Okay? All right, enough for today. New video coming soon. I love you guys, and thanks for being a part of this journey for the past 10 years. Bye.